Okay, guys, did a little experimenting. I've been a bit under the weather, uh, so I haven't been getting a whole lot done. But we did get the new EQ valves. Getting valves at this point is an absolute nightmare. I was able to get Ferraras 1.94s, but I was not able to get Ferrara 1.5s. I had to get a set of Manleys, and they're both a good valve. I prefer the Ferrara because it comes with a really high margin. Yes, that adds weight to it. It is neck down. I do like that. Okay, it's a nice valve. So what we did, I'm probably going to name this thread, what's a back cut worth or something like that as far as flow. I mean, you can see, at least you should be able to see, that I put a back cut on that intake valve, right? I don't really use back cuts on exhausts. It's not really what you want. Back cut on exhaust is just it will increase your low lift flow, but it'll also increase your reversion, which we don't want. Okay, so I'm a long way from back cuts, but I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Okay, this is the stalker. Come on. It has a little machined lip on the edge. I can't focus on it worth a damn. I'm gonna get my hand out of there. Okay, you can see that, right? It's got a little bit of an angle machined on that. And the experiment that I did was I rounded that, which is an old David Vizard modification. It's supposed to give it a little more help getting the gases around the valve. So let's see how they did. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I should show you too. These are the valves that these ports were developed with. This was an old 208 that I machined down, and it actually has about a 60 thousandths. No, actually a little more than that. Maybe a 70 thousandths seat there, right? And an old GM valve that's just 45. Okay, you can notice how much heavier the stems are on the GM versus the Manleys, right? That's got to be worth a few CFMs right there. This one is already neck down, so the Ferraras are also neck down. So you're not really going to gain much flow from the Ferraras. The only thing that I actually noticed is this back cut was actually a little bit too big for the seats in the head. Because when I put the new valve in and I put a little blue on it, it was no good. So I actually had to reduce the size of my back cut a little bit in order to make it work. So when we're comparing this row, which is the valve that it was originally designed with, right? This row, which is the GM 1.5, I took the Ferrara with no back cut right out of the package, and you can see minus, 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 all the way to 500. Where at 500, it cranks. Now, somebody's going to say, well, Charlie, how is that even possible? Well, it has to do with the way the air flows around that sharp edge on that valve, right? And at that much lift, it's out of the way and actually makes a more efficient path than the back cut. It would be nice if you could vary the back cut according to lift, right? You could have a big back cut right in right in this area right here, right? You have no back cut up top because you don't want a big flow at the very low lift numbers for reversion, right? You want you want a nice back cut right in the middle, and then no back cut at the top. That would be ideal, right? So what you can do is you can change the degree of the back cut, you can change the width of the back cut, which will all change the way it flows. The only way to figure it out is to test it. Okay? I was thrilled to see that this port flowed 256. But if you add up how much you lose on all these others, let's take a look at them, right? 0.15, 121 to 90.4. Ouch. All right. 160 to 123. At 300, 212 versus 196. It just beats the mid-range up to death. And since it's a street ride, we really want a strong mid-range, right? If we were doing a dragster that had a real high lift cam, we would want no back cut on this. In fact, that's kind of the way I do back cuts. If I'm running something with a lot of compression and a lot of RPM, probably won't have a back cut on it at all. It's one of those things, like I said, you gotta test it. So I think it's interesting, right? We gained at the very top with no back cut. Everything else got beat bad. All right, take a look at the 1.5 Manly versus the GM. I didn't put the little pluses and minuses. Okay, added your pluses and minuses on. The only thing the Manly loses is absolutely at the low lift, 0.05, you lose a little tiny bit from 30.5 to 30. And at the very, very top, at 700 lift, you go from 195 to 188. But in the mid-range, everything else in the middle, you get a nice pickup. I mean, at 200, you go from 95 to 114.9. Nice pickup. 300, 132 to 151. That's a nice flowing exhaust port at 300 lift. Okay, 400, we go from 156 to 169.2. 500, 175.5. Right, that's 190 with a small pipe, 205 with a big pipe, to 180.3, 187.6 with a small pipe, 205.7 with the big pipe. Okay, that exhaust port's working really well, even with a small exhaust valve. So that's going to work out really, really nice on this motor. Okay, now last row. Last row is we're going to be using this valve with the back cut. Okay, and we're going to use the valve with the DV radius on it. And you can see by the pluses here, right? The back cut adds until we get to 500, and then it drops down. Okay, you're comparing this column to this column. We lose quite a bit at 500, right? We lose 16 ZFM. That's not great. But take a look at how much we gain all the way up. All right, this mid-range is killer. So we need to keep that way. So at this point, I'm saying it's advantageous to run the Ferrara with a back cut. Now that back cut was a 30, and it's not like I have a bunch of extra valves that I can just try different back cuts and so forth. 30 is a good go-to number for a back cut. Now let's take a look at the last column. Let me put the pluses and minuses. Okay, I added the pluses and minuses. It's a mixed bag. You get a little more low lift flow, you drop down in the mid-range, and you get a little tiny bit addition at 700. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a loser. So the rest of these valves will not get modified. They will come basically right out of the box, right into the cylinder head. The only thing I'll do is I'll check how, the stem thickness and so forth. Other than that, they're going right in. The Ferraras have to get a back cut. So it is kind of interesting how much a back cut is worth on certain cylinder heads. But like I say, that's one of those things that has to be tested. And some of the things that make a huge difference, all right? Here, let's see if we can put this right next to this. And you'll see why the original valve did so well, right? Since the original valve I made it out of a 208, look how thick that margin is. And the reason I like the Ferraras is they got a nice thick margin, okay? So the only reason that we lost a little bit of flow going to the Ferrara, right? We've got a bunch of negatives here versus this one. Because this back cut was a little too big, and I didn't realize it when I was developing that port. Good to know, right? Should always make sure your seat is very comfortable on the valve. These seats on here are a little on the narrow side. I'm not going to change them. They're all good right now. I went through all of them as far as sizes. They're all 1,000th or under. And after they get brain dead, they'll get lapped and they'll be right on the money and they'll be beautiful in every way like my wife. And that'll be that. All right, guys. Overall, really happy with the way these turned out. These turned out really nice. They're going to make nice power. I did a bunch more work to that intake. That's another whole video how I modify the intakes and taper, and there's a bunch of different stuff I got to get into. It'll have to wait till I'm feeling a little better. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.